Hey everybody, what is going on? Greg here with Z21 Learning, and today's tutorial is going to be a two-part, well, not two-part, but we're going to focus on two different things. One, we're going to take a look at how to open a show rundown, how to open the graphic playlist for a newscast. And then secondly, we're also going to take a look at how to control the graphics during that show. So we'll talk more about iSQ and that service and how the Icecube Panel works. But first off, before we get too far ahead, this is the graphics workstation in our control room here. The computer on the left is hooked up to a KVM, so you can access multiple different computers from just this one workstation. The machine on the right is the graphics PC. You have programs such as Adobe, Photoshop, After Effects, a lot of the Adobe suites on there, as well as EMPS. So in order to go ahead and open up a show rundown, first thing you have to do is you have to make sure within EMPS that your show is MOS control activated as well as MOS ready to air. So over here inside of EMPS, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to my enterprise browser. I'm going to click on this. Normally there would be a button over here called Home, and you would click on that and also open the same thing. The home button unfortunately isn't working for our Graphics One profile here on the machine, so you have to go into the enterprise browser. Anyways, and let's say we need to open up the 6 a.m. sunrise show. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and select it. And then I'm going to come up here to production. I'm going to click on this tab, and I'm going to go ahead and check MOS control active and MOS ready to air. And basically what those functions are going to do is it's going to say, hey, this show is ready to go ahead and air. It's going to send a command over to the Chiron Mosaic machine and say, hey, there is a new show playlist for you to go ahead and access. And via the iSQ service on Mosaic, you can then pull it up within iSQ. I know you're probably thinking this is the law of terminology. I don't get it right now. Bear with me. It all makes sense here in just a moment. I should mention first though, chances are the producer is going to be the one typically that's going to make sure the show is MOS control active, as well as MOS ready to air. But in case you're not seeing your show inside of the iSQ playout or inside the iSQ viewer, just make sure that it is MOS activated on both of these. So I want to go ahead and access the Chiron Mosaic computer here on the left side, here on the left machine. So the way I would do that is if I wasn't on Chiron Mosaic, I would just go ahead and press scroll lock twice on the keyboard, and that opens up the KVM here. And then I can use the up and down arrows to go ahead and select which computer I want to access. In this case, I'm already on Chiron Mosaic, so I'm just going to go ahead and press close. And ta-da, here we are. So here inside of Chiron Mosaic, what I want to do is I want to go ahead and make sure that the Chiron iSQ service is open. And basically what the Chiron iSQ service does, actually let me go ahead and take a step back. Basically the way this whole process works is inside of Cameo Asset Manager, there are all these lyric templates that we have created inside of Lyric Design that we upload into Cameo Asset Manager. Now the news department doesn't have access to Cameo Asset Manager. It's more like a database as well as a render engine. They can access Asset Manager via the Lucy plugin inside of EMPS. So anytime they're looking for a graphic or an image or a video or something, they're going into the Lucy plugin and searching for what Cameo Asset Manager has available for them to use. Now once they go ahead and create a MOS ID for the graphic, they save it into their script. That graphic MOS ID then gets stored onto Chiron Mosaic. So Chiron Mosaic then stores the graphic as well as I think it's the rundown for all the shows. So anytime they MOS control activate a new show, the rundown's going to show up. Chiron Mosaic is going to say, hey, I've got all these graphics, they're stored on this machine. But when we actually control those graphics and play them out over air, we access them via Chiron iSQ. Inside of Chiron Mosaic, this is the interface right now of Lyric. And there's kind of two different versions with Lyric you have. You have Lyric Design, and then you have the Chiron iSQ service. And the easiest way to tell which one is open is to come down here to the bottom right And you see this little icon here, and this is basically telling you this is the Chiron iSQ server. So if you have this icon showing, it's letting you know that you have the iSQ service open. The way to go ahead and close out of the iSQ service is you just right click on it and press shutdown. It's letting me know there's an active playlist right now on the iSQ machine. I'm going to go ahead and press yes anyways. It's basically going to go ahead and lose connection on that machine. That's totally fine. I'm not worried about that. Here's the lyric design option over here. And basically that's just for design templates. So if you're curious about if you were going to go ahead and be designing like a lower third or something, you'd be working inside of Lyric Design, and then you would upload from Lyric Design to Cameo Asset Manager with your template. With iSQ Service, you don't have access to upload graphics into Cameo Asset Manager. All iSQ Service does basically establishes a connection for the Chiron iSQ machine to look at the graphics that are stored on Mosaic. I'm by no means a Chiron expert on these things. This is what I've been told, so bear with me. So again, I had iSQ service already open when I first came onto this machine. I closed it out. I'm just going to go ahead and relaunch it by double clicking on it. It takes a second. It's going to go ahead and load here. You might be noticing right now that the frame buffers just flashed this bright green. Basically, the frame buffers, also known as the output, those are the channels where the graphics that are live reside. And it's in those channels where the director is able to pull those graphics in via the switcher, so they're able to key them over video or to put them into a monitor background or something like that. Anytime you close out of iSQ and relaunch it, the frame buffers are automatically going to go ahead and kind of reset themselves and blow out anything that's in there. So when they flash green like that, don't be too concerned. You should be concerned though when they flash green and they stay green after iSQ Service or Lyric Design has opened. If that happens, talk to engineering right away. It's a bit tricky of a fix, but anyways. So I've got iSQ relaunched. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back onto the KVM and I'm going to go ahead and access the Chiron iSQ machine. So again, to access the KVM, you're just going to press scroll lock twice on the keyboard. And I'm going to use the up arrow here to access Chiron iSQ. And I'm just going to press enter. And that brings me into the iSQ machine. And one thing I want to point out first, and I should have mentioned this earlier, in case you're looking at iSQ, Chiron iSQ, or Chiron Mosaic, the desktop background image may be slightly different. The way I'm accessing it, it kind of doesn't see that background image, so it just shows up as a black background or a light blue background. That has nothing to do with the way this whole procedure works. It's just kind of something with the screen grab software I'm using, so bear with me on that. So now that I've got the connection established on Chiron Mosaic with iSQ, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come over here and there's this iSQ viewer. And this is kind of the second part. So remember on Chiron Mosaic we launched Chiron iSQ service. And now on Chiron iSQ we're going to go ahead and launch the viewer that taps into that service so we're able to see the rundowns for the shows. So a couple things I want to mention first here in our service viewer. Here over here on the top right we have our current view set to rundown. We could also set this to service, and basically service is going to look for any Chiron machines that also have an iSQ service available. In this case we only have the one Chiron Mosaic, so that's the only one it's seen. So we can come back over here to rundown. And I have a couple different options for viewing my rundown. What I would do is I just go ahead and select it, and I can go ahead and press view. And basically view is going to go ahead and open up your show, and you see we have two different graphic channels here and stuff, so that's pretty much what a view does. Now I don't necessarily recommend view if you're trying to open up multiple shows, and here's why. Let's say I wanted to open up the 6 a.m. show with also the 11 o'clock show. If I were to go ahead and press view again, what it does is it takes the first two channels, which were the 6 a.m. show, as well as the next two channels, which are the graphics for the 11 o'clock show, and it puts them all in one gigantic show rundown. This technically doesn't work. It doesn't play out, it doesn't do anything, so if you want to have multiple shows open, rather than doing the view option, you want to press tab instead. And basically what tab is going to do is it's going to go ahead and create two different tabs for the shows. So I have one over here that's going to be the 6 a.m. sunrise, and I can cycle through the graphics for this show. And then my second tab is going to be for the 11 o'clock show. And both of these shows will operate independently from each other. In other words, when I press take over here and play this graphic over air, it's not going to affect anything in the 11 o'clock show. It doesn't queue up this graphic as well. I also have the option of hiding a show, so if I didn't want to see it over here, I could hide it. I really haven't found a need to hide a particular show yet. Typically what you would do at the end of your shift is you would go into Chiron Mosaic and you would close out of the iSQ service, and then if you wanted, you could relaunch it again. And basically what that's going to do is it's going to look to see if there's any shows that are MOS control active, and if so, those shows are going to show up. So once you're done with your show, assuming the producer or yourself has unMOSed the show, when you relaunch the iSQ service on Chiron Mosaic again, those shows won't show up anymore. You also have Connect if you need to quickly connect to an iSQ service that's remote. We don't do that, so we're not going to worry about that in this case. Selected, the options are the same for what you have down below. View is kind of the same options over here that we talked about. Configure is kind of important for knowing, configure kind of taps into how you want to view the playlist inside of iSQ, how you want the panel to be set up. In this tutorial, we're not going to go ahead and talk too much about the playlist options or about configuring the playlist. Our settings right now are kind of the ones that everybody's sort of happy with, so we're just going to leave those alone. And honestly, you shouldn't be messing around with these too much. This is more something like the engineering should be dealing with, or even myself. And of course, if you ever have any problems, you can always go up to the help menu. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch our 6 a.m. sunrise show. And I'm just going to press tab, and voila, our show is live. At this point, if you were just trying to open up a show, you're done. You don't have to watch the rest of the tutorial. You can just, stop the video, move on with your life, go watch something else, have fun. You're done. But if you want to stick around for the second part of this video, where we're going to go ahead and talk about how to play out graphics via the iSQ panel as well as the interface. So before I go ahead and start talking about the iSQ panel, I briefly want to go ahead and talk about a little bit about this interface. Over here in our top left, we've got two windows. We've got one here on the left that's green. This is basically telling you what's out over air. This is what's currently residing in our frame buffer, also known as the output. So on channel 1, we currently have our anchor's name up here. And then in this yellow box, this is telling you what is previewed. So this is our next graphic. So if I were to take this graphic over air, it would then go ahead and replace our anchor's name with our chief meteorologist's name. And once you go ahead and take a graphic, the playlist is automatically going to advance down to the next graphic. So it's going to go in page number order here. So green is basically letting you know. So again, green is letting you know, hey, this is the graphic that's currently on air. This is the graphic that's live. Yellow is letting you know this is the next graphic. This is the graphic that is in preview. And red is basically saying, hey, there's nothing currently going on. I've got nothing in the output. I've got nothing in preview. I currently have no graphics activated. So that's pretty much the rundown in a nutshell. Let's go ahead and talk about, we'll come back to what some of these other options are up here in just a moment. But first, I want to go ahead and talk about the iSQ panel and how that works. All right, so this is the iSQ panel. As you can see, it holds up to 4 different graphic outputs. Right now, we only have 2 frame buffers, so we only are using channels 1 and channels 2, the green column and the orange column here. Channels 3 and 4 are currently unused, and these buttons actually don't do anything, so if you come over here and you press them, they don't actually key up or do anything. So the primary buttons that you're going to use are going to be kind of these ones right here. It's pretty basic. So you've got your play button down here, which is your take button. So anytime you press that, it's going to go ahead and take that graphic to air. As you just saw there, our anchor's name got updated with our meteorologist's name. Up above that, we've got these two sets of arrow buttons. And basically what these arrow buttons are going to do is they're going to allow you to jump forward or backwards to the next CG. So right now we can tell I'm on alpha 6, so maybe I wanted to skip that and go to alpha 7. I just press the down arrow here and press take to cue it up. And when I take it again, I've got the person's name up here, and I managed to skip alpha 6's CG completely. The other sets of arrow keys you have here, the arrow with the line on top or underneath it, basically allows you to go ahead and skip by page number. So in this case, we can tell that if I go down here to alpha 14, we can tell that my next two CGs are both for the alpha 16 story. Let's pretend in this case that the producer's come along and has decided to float that story. What I could do is I could go ahead and skip over both of those just by pressing this one twice, and it's going to go ahead and go to alpha 18. So this comes in handy if there's multiple CGs inside of a story segment. In this case, there are two CGs inside of alpha 16 that I need to skip over rather than having to go manually through each single CG. It just can skip over by page number. The button here on top is your pause release button. And basically what it's letting you know is there are some graphics we have pauses enabled on there. And you have to release those pauses, which cause a little animation to appear. In this case, we happen to have a full screen with bullet points on it. So when I take that graphic, it animates on the screen, but we're not seeing the bullet points yet. And the reason why is we need to go ahead and release the pause that's holding those bullet points from being revealed. You can also tell there are bullet points, or that there is a pause set on this graphic, because inside of our iSQ viewer here, we can see that the green line letting us know it's on air is also flashing, letting us know, hey, there are pauses with this, you need to release them. So I'm just going to go ahead and kind of bust on through these. Once the graphic has gone through all the pauses, it stops flashing, holds the solid color, letting you know you're done with that. The top button here is the stop button. And basically what the stop button does is it goes ahead and clears the output. It's basically going to go ahead and blow out any graphic that's on the frame buffer. It's going to go ahead and clear it completely off the screen. It's going to delete it. Think of it that way. So what I'm going to do, I press the stop button. It's going to go ahead and cause the effect out on the graphic to go ahead and animate. The graphic effects off the screen, and it's gone. If I look over here at my playlist viewer, there is no green, none of the graphics are selected as green under channel 1. It's basically letting you know, hey, there is no graphic that is currently live in this case. You only have a graphic that is previewed. Press take 1. Now that's the graphic that's live. I've got live back. Ta-da. Let me put something in frame buffer 2 so that looks better. So there's some other buttons to go ahead and mention too. First is the home button. And basically what the home button does is when you press it, it takes you back up to the top of the playlist. So if you're cycling through graphics and you're just looking ahead, you can just press the home button and it'll take you back up to the top of the show. Story button's kind of cool in that what it allows you to do is it allows you to go ahead and find a graphic or find a page number that you want to be at, and when you press it, it's going to go ahead and bring both channels to that page number. So it's going to go ahead and match them up at the same time. Let me show you what I mean by that. So let's say in this instance that I need to go ahead and jump ahead really far down the show. Let's say I need to go to C2. What I'm going to do in this case is on channel 2, I'm just going to go ahead and jump ahead to C2. And then I'm going to press the story button and watch what happens to the graphics on channel 1. They automatically jump to C2, so it matches with the same page number of the graphics on channel 2, as well as it also puts both of them into queue. So when I go ahead and take both of the graphics, they update on the output. The escape navigation button over here comes in handy if maybe you're jumping really far ahead, just to go ahead and see what's coming up, and you need to get back to where you were on your channel. what you can do is you just go ahead and press the escape navigation, and it returns you to the last CG that you have set in preview, in this case, Charlie 3. And then up here at the top, we have some macro buttons. Currently, we have no macros enabled, so these buttons don't actually do anything. But if we did have a particular macro set, we could go ahead and activate it just by pressing the corresponding button with the correct macro. I know in the past we did use this with when we were doing our old live flag. We were activating it using macros. Since then, we've actually put the live flag onto the TD switcher so that we don't have any need to use the macro, but that's pretty much how that works. One last thing I do want to mention about the panel is making sure that the panel is getting power. I know it sounds stupid, but bear with me. To see if the panel is getting power, just make sure that the green light here is on, and it is in this case. That lets me know that the panel is connected, it is getting power, it's plugged in and all that. It's a really good idea, good practice to go ahead and cycle through a couple graphics before the show. If you have time actually just to cycle through all the graphics for the show, but I understand there's time constraints sometimes, so you don't necessarily have time to do that. But at least to go ahead and open up a show and cycle through some graphics, make sure that the basic functionality of the panel is working, that it is responsive to your commands and stuff. On the off chance that the panel becomes unresponsive, you can do some of the same features using the iSQ playlist interface. Let's go ahead and talk about that now. So over here towards the top, we've kind of got same corresponding buttons for both channels 1 and channels 2. So our first button over here is the take, and I can go ahead and use my mouse to go ahead and control this, so I can take the graphic and we saw it update. Likewise, I can also go ahead and clear out the frame buffer just for pressing stop, and that causes the effect out to go ahead and play. And if I wanted, I could also go ahead and likewise release the pauses on the full screen. On the off chance that you don't like having the on-air graphic being shown, you can also go ahead and hide that so you only see your preview up here. You just go ahead and press the air thumbnail button, and it hides whatever is currently live, so you have to look up at the frame buffer in this case to see what graphic is playing out. Or you can also see it down here in our thumbnail in our playlist viewer down here. Usually we do work with this showing what's currently on air, so we do leave that on. So if you want to turn it off, that's fine. Just know that when you're done, turn it back on so the next person isn't confused. You also have the option to be able to loop the playlist, so if you were at the end of a show, it would go ahead and jump back up to the beginning of it when you took the next graphic. That's at the very end. You would go back up to the top. To be honest, I've never had a need to actually loop a show yet. I guess if you were doing like breaking news or something and you wanted to toggle back and forth between two CGs, and that's all the CGs you had in your show, it would come in handy. In this case, because I've got a whole show, a whole hour's worth of graphics here, there's no need. You have the refresh option here, and refresh is kind of cool because it gives you two different options. You have the option to be able to refresh all the playlist contents, and that's basically what these are, so your options. So you can look to see if they've added any new lower thirds, or if they've updated any lower thirds, full screens, graphics, things like that. As well as looking to update the playlist thumbnails, and these are the thumbnails that you have right here. In this case, let's pretend that maybe the producer came in here and wanted to change out this fire picture. They didn't want to have a picture of smoke. They wanted to maybe have a picture of like an actual fire blaze or something like that. What you could do then is you go ahead and refresh the playlist thumbnails to go ahead and see if it'll update that. And chances are it would. You can also tell whenever you do an update down here below, it's going to go ahead and give you kind of the status of that update. And to let you know that the contents have been updated. Looks like there was no changes, so nothing really happened, but you get the idea. Next to the refresh, you have the option to be able to configure the playlist viewer. And basically what that means is you can go ahead and change what columns you want shown here inside of your viewer. So you can come over here to your column visibility. We could add, created by or file name, things like that. We can also go ahead and filter some of our columns if we want to. For the most part, we tend to leave this view alone. This seems to be the view that most people are happy with. So this is the view that we just default with. On the off chance you come into the Icecube playlist viewer and this view is all messed up, we do have a backup saved, and the way you would access that is you just press use a local file, come over here to this K2Z iSQ default. You would select that, you would press open, and it would launch this view. Next, we have playlist automation. Because we actually have a live person control our graphics, we don't need to worry about the automation here. You also have playlist editing. This is disabled. The important thing to note is whenever you enable playlist editing, it's going to go ahead and stop looking for live updates. So we definitely don't want to have that happen. So I recommend making sure that playlist editing is disabled. You have remote macros. In this case, we're not working with any, so we don't need to worry about that. And GPIs, again, it's disabled because we're not actually using this feature, so no need to worry about that either. And that is iSQ in a nutshell. I know we covered a lot of ground today. Just to go ahead and recap, here are the steps. So 1, inside of EMPS, make sure that your show is MOS control active as well as MOS ready to air. 2, on Chiron Mosaic, make sure that the Chiron iSQ service is launched. You can, if it's already launched, feel free to close it out and relaunch it. If it's not launched, launch it. From there, you're going to go on to Chiron iSQ. You're going to make sure that the iSQ viewer is opened. You should see your show in there. You're going to select it. You can press View or Tab. And then, ta-da, your show is open. If you guys have any questions, feel free to comment below, shoot me an email, text, whatever. As always, thanks for watching. Until next time, take it easy.